The Invitation to Serve. Written and copyright by A. A. Castor. Welcome, everyone, to A. A. Castor Book Club. Today's story is The Invitation to Serve. Prepare yourselves for a chilling and macabre journey, where love, trust, and terror collide in a horrifying narrative. Chapter 1. The Invitation. My fiancé, Richard, invited me to visit his family's farm in the province. I am a 27-year-old woman, full-figured and fair-skinned. Richard is a 30-year-old man, and we have been living together in the bustling metro. Our engagement was a whirlwind, happening just 3 months after we met. It was a lovely event, filled with joy and promises of a future together. However, I had never met Richard's parents, and now he wanted me to meet them in person. "Are you excited to meet my family?" Richard asked as we packed our bags. His eyes sparkled with anticipation, and his smile was infectious. He was always the optimistic one, seeing the good in every situation. "Yes, but a little nervous too," I admitted. "What are they like?" I tried to keep my voice light, but the truth was, I was worried. Meeting your fiancé's family is always a big deal, and I wanted to make a good impression. Richard chuckled, his laughter easing some of my anxiety. "They're wonderful people," he assured me. "They have a farm in the province, and the whole family will be there. They're excited to meet you and celebrate our engagement. They're looking forward to serving you." The word serve struck me as odd, but I brushed it off, thinking it must be a provincial way of expressing hospitality. Richard's family had deep roots in the countryside, and I assumed their customs might be different from what I was used to in the metro. We left early the next morning, the city gradually giving way to open fields and rolling hills as we drove further into the countryside. The air was fresh and crisp, a welcome change from the polluted city air I had grown accustomed to. Richard seemed at ease, his relaxed demeanor helping to calm my nerves. As we approached the farmhouse, I was struck by its quaint charm. It was a picturesque scene straight out of a storybook, a cozy house with a thatched roof, surrounded by vibrant flowers and tall, swaying trees. Richard's parents were waiting on the porch, their faces lighting up as they saw us. "Welcome. We've been looking forward to meeting you," his mother said, embracing me warmly. She was a petite woman with kind eyes, her hair streaked with gray. There was an air of warmth and kindness about her that immediately put me at ease. "Thank you for having me," I replied, smiling. Richard's father, a tall, robust man with a friendly demeanor, shook my hand firmly. "Make yourself at home. Tomorrow, the whole family will be here to spend time with you and to serve you." Again, the word serve caught my attention, but their warmth and hospitality made me feel at ease. They asked me to rest and eat, insisting that I must be tired from the journey. Richard showed me to the guest room, a cozy space with a large bed and a window overlooking the fields. As I settled into the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Richard's parents seemed lovely, but there was something about the way they spoke, the way they kept mentioning serving me, that felt off. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid. Richard knocked on the door and peeked his head in. "Hey, you okay?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." He came in and sat beside me on the bed. "I know this is a lot, but my family is really excited to meet you. They're going to love you, just like I do." His words were comforting, and I leaned into him, feeling some of my tension melt away. "I hope so," I said softly. "I want to make a good impression." "You already have," he assured me, kissing my forehead. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The farmhouse was quiet, the only sound the distant chirping of crickets. Despite Richard's reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way his parents had looked at me, the way they spoke about serving me, it all felt strange. But I told myself I was being silly. Richard loved me, and his family would love me too. Everything would be fine. As I drifted off to sleep, I tried to focus on the positive. I was about to meet the family of the man I loved, and we were going to spend a lovely weekend together in the countryside. What could possibly go wrong? Chapter 2: A Dark Awakening. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the room. I stretched and sat up, feeling a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake off. Richard was already up and about, bustling around the room as he got dressed. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, though the truth was, my sleep had been restless and filled with unsettling dreams. "Yeah, I guess so. What's the plan for today?" Richard's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Today is the big day. The whole family is coming over for the celebration. They're all excited to meet you and, as they said, to serve you." I forced a smile, trying to match his enthusiasm. "That sounds great. I can't wait to meet everyone." We made our way downstairs to find Richard's parents already busy in the kitchen, preparing a lavish breakfast spread. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, and my stomach growled in response. "Good morning, dear." Richard's mother greeted me warmly. "I hope you're hungry. We have a big day ahead of us." I took a seat at the table, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "Thank you. It all smells wonderful." As we ate breakfast, Richard's parents chatted about the day's events. "The whole family will be here by noon," his father said. "We'll have a big feast and lots of activities planned." Richard's mother nodded in agreement. "Everyone is really looking forward to spending time with you. They all want to get to know the woman who stole Richard's heart." I smiled politely, but the nagging feeling of unease lingered. "I'm looking forward to it too." After breakfast, Richard and I went for a walk around the farm. The morning air was crisp and refreshing, and the countryside was beautiful in the early light. Richard pointed out various landmarks and shared stories about his childhood. "It's so peaceful here," I said, trying to focus on the positive. "I can see why you love it so much." Richard nodded, a contented smile on his face. "It's home, and now it's our home too." His words warmed my heart, and I tried to push away the lingering doubts. This was a chance to build a future together, surrounded by family and nature. What could be better than that? As we walked back to the house, we saw cars pulling up the driveway. Richard's family was arriving. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the introductions. The family members came in waves, each one more enthusiastic than the last. Richard's aunts, uncles, and cousins greeted me with hugs and smiles, making me feel welcome. They were all so friendly, and I began to relax. One of Richard's aunts, a tall woman with a loud laugh, took my hands in hers. "You look so lovely, dear. We've heard so much about you. Welcome to the family." "Thank you," I said, feeling a little overwhelmed by her enthusiasm. Richard's uncle, a burly man with a gruff voice, gave me a hearty pat on the back. "We're glad you could join us. It's about time Richard brought someone home." I smiled, trying to keep up with the barrage of greetings. "I'm happy to be here." As the day went on, I began to feel more at ease. Richard's family was warm and welcoming, and their home was filled with laughter and love. It was exactly what I had hoped for. At lunch, we gathered around a long wooden table laden with food. There was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, and a variety of pies for dessert. Richard's mother had outdone herself, and the meal was a feast fit for a king. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily. Richard's family asked me about my life in the city, my job, and how Richard and I had met. I told them about our whirlwind romance, how we had fallen in love almost instantly. They listened with interest, their expressions warm and encouraging. But there were moments when I caught a strange look in their eyes, a fleeting expression that I couldn't quite place. It was as if they were sizing me up, assessing me in some way. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. After lunch, Richard's aunt and uncle approached me. They were a jovial pair, always cracking jokes and making everyone laugh. but there was something unsettling about the way they looked at me. "You look tasty," his uncle said with a grin. "I wonder how you would taste." I laughed nervously, not sure how to respond. "That's an odd thing to say." His aunt elbowed him playfully. "Oh, don't mind him. He's just joking. You look like a nice girl. We can't resist teasing you a bit." I forced a smile, but their words left me feeling uneasy. There was something off about the way they joked, something that didn't sit right with me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Richard's family was kind and welcoming, but there was an undercurrent of something darker that I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the positive and enjoying the time with my new extended family. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Richard took my hand and led me to a quiet spot on the porch. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Better," I admitted. "Your family is wonderful. I'm just a little tired, I guess." He squeezed my hand. "They love you already. You've made a great impression." I leaned against him, feeling a sense of relief. "I'm glad. I want to fit in, to be part of this family." "You already are," he assured me. "Now let's get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day." As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Richard's family had been so welcoming, but there was an edge to their hospitality that I couldn't ignore. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew that something was not quite right. Chapter 3: The Gathering. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of anticipation and unease. Today was the big celebration, and Richard's entire family would be there. The house was already bustling with activity as I made my way downstairs. Richard was in the kitchen with his mother, helping her prepare breakfast. "Good morning," I greeted them, trying to shake off my anxiety. "Good morning, dear," Richard's mother replied with a warm smile. "I hope you're ready for a busy day. The whole family will be here soon." Richard turned to me, his eyes filled with excitement. "Today is going to be great. Everyone is looking forward to spending time with you." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm looking forward to it too." After breakfast, we spent the morning setting up for the celebration. Richard's family arrived in waves, each group bringing more food and decorations. The backyard was transformed into a festive gathering space, with tables laden with food and drinks, and colorful banners strung between the trees. As the guests mingled, I found myself drawn into conversation after conversation. Richard's cousins were particularly interested in my life in the city, asking me about my job and hobbies. "So, what do you do for work?" one of his cousins, a young woman named Emily, asked. "I'm a graphic designer," I replied. "I work for an advertising agency." Emily's eyes lit up. "That sounds so cool. Do you get to work on big projects?" "Sometimes," I said, smiling. "It's a lot of fun, but it can be stressful too." Emily nodded. "I can imagine. It must be nice to have a creative job, though." "It is," I agreed. "I love being able to express myself through my work." As the day went on, I started to feel more at ease. Richard's family was warm and welcoming, and I began to relax and enjoy myself. But every now and then, I would catch a strange look in someone's eyes, a fleeting expression that made me feel uneasy. During lunch, I sat with Richard and his parents, enjoying the delicious food they had prepared. The conversation was light and pleasant, and I found myself laughing and smiling more than I had in days. "This is amazing," I said, taking a bite of roasted chicken. "You really outdid yourselves." Richard's mother beamed. "Thank you, dear. We're so glad you like it." Richard's father nodded. "It's important to us that you feel at home here." "I do," I assured them. "You've all been so wonderful." After lunch, Richard's aunt and uncle approached me again. This time, they seemed even more eager to talk. "How are you enjoying the celebration?" Richard's uncle asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "It's been great," I replied, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. "Everyone has been so kind." His aunt nodded, a sly smile on her lips. "We're glad to hear that. We've been talking about you. You really do look tasty." I laughed nervously. "You and your jokes." Richard's uncle grinned. "We're just having a bit of fun. But seriously, you do look delicious." I forced a smile, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Thanks, I guess." As the day turned into evening, the celebration continued. Richard's family was in high spirits, laughing and chatting as they enjoyed the food and drink. I tried to join in, but the unsettling comments from Richard's aunt and uncle kept replaying in my mind. Later that night, as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Richard took my hand and led me to a quiet spot under a tree. The moon was full, casting a soft glow over the yard. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm okay," I replied, leaning against him. "It's been a long day." He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "You were amazing today. Everyone loves you." "I love them too," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "I'm just a little tired." "That's understandable," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Let's get some rest. Tomorrow is another big day." As we walked back to the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Richard's family had been so welcoming, but there was something off about their behavior. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew that something was not quite right. Chapter 4. An Eerie Revelation. The next morning dawned with a crisp chill in the air. The celebration had left me feeling both exhausted and uneasy. Richard's family had been so overwhelmingly kind, yet something felt fundamentally wrong. I couldn't shake off the peculiar comments from his aunt and uncle about how tasty I looked. Richard was already up when I stirred, a warm smile on his face as he handed me a steaming cup of coffee. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my forehead. "How did you sleep?" "I slept okay," I replied, though the truth was I had spent the night tossing and turning, haunted by the strange interactions from the previous day. "What's the plan for today?" "Today," Richard began, his eyes gleaming with excitement, "is the big family feast. Everyone will be here again. They're all looking forward to spending more time with you." I forced a smile, trying to mask my growing apprehension. "That sounds nice." The morning passed in a blur of preparations. Richard's mother bustled around the kitchen, directing the flurry of activity as dishes were prepared and the house was readied for the influx of guests. I offered to help, but she insisted I relax and enjoy myself. As the time for the feast approached, family members began arriving in droves, their faces alight with anticipation. I found myself being pulled into conversations, my discomfort growing with each passing minute. Emily, the cousin who had been so friendly the previous day, sidled up to me with a conspiratorial grin. "So, how's it going? Enjoying the country life?" "It's different," I admitted, glancing around nervously. "Everyone is very enthusiastic." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that seemed to hold a hint of something darker. "Oh, we're a close-knit family. We like to make our guests feel special." "Yeah, I've noticed," I replied, forcing a chuckle. As we spoke, I noticed Richard's uncle and aunt watching us from across the room. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes held that same unsettling glint. "Ready for the big feast?" Emily asked, breaking my train of thought. "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Great, you'll love it. It's a tradition that we all take very seriously." The words sent a shiver down my spine, but I nodded and smiled, not wanting to appear rude. Finally, it was time for the feast. The dining room was a hive of activity, with a long table groaning under the weight of the food that had been meticulously prepared. I found myself seated at the head of the table, a position of honor that only served to heighten my anxiety. Richard's father stood up, raising a glass. "To our guest of honor," he proclaimed, his voice carrying a note of pride. "We are delighted to have you with us and look forward to many more celebrations together." The toast was met with enthusiastic applause and cheers. I raised my glass, murmuring my thanks as I tried to quell the knot of fear tightening in my stomach. The meal began, and the atmosphere grew increasingly festive. Plates were passed around, laughter rang out, and glasses clinked in a cacophony of celebration. I picked at my food, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was during the dessert course that the conversation took a darker turn. Richard's uncle leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "So, how are you enjoying your stay?" "It's been lovely," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "Good, good," he said, his eyes glittering. "You know, we're all very excited to have you here. You're quite the catch." I forced a smile. "Thank you." He chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. "And I'm sure you'll be even more enjoyable tonight." Before I could respond, Richard's aunt chimed in. "Yes, we're all looking forward to it. It's been a long time since we've had such a special guest." My heart raced, and I glanced at Richard, who was deep in conversation with his father. He didn't seem to notice the increasingly sinister tone of the conversation. As the meal drew to a close, Richard's mother stood up. "Now, my dear, it's time for you to get some rest. Tomorrow will be another big day, and we want you to be well rested." I nodded, relieved at the prospect of escaping the oppressive atmosphere of the dining room. Richard stood up and took my hand, leading me upstairs to our room. "Get some sleep," he said, kissing me gently. "I'll be here soon." I climbed into bed, my mind racing. Something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Exhaustion eventually claimed me, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. Chapter 5. The horror unfolds. I awoke to the feeling of cold metal around my wrists and ankles. Panic surged through me as I realized I was bound to the bed. The room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through the window. I tried to scream, but a gag muffled my cries. The door creaked open, and Richard entered the room, followed by his parents, aunt, and uncle. Their faces were eerily calm, their eyes shining with a predatory hunger. "Relax, my love," Richard said, his voice soothing. "Everything will be fine." I struggled against my restraints, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Richard's mother stepped forward, her expression one of almost maternal concern. "We just want a little piece of you, dear. Nothing to be afraid of." My heart pounded in my chest as they gathered around me. Richard produced a large knife, its blade glinting in the moonlight. "Please," I begged through the gag, tears streaming down my face. Richard's aunt patted my hand. "Don't worry, sweetie. It'll all be over soon." With a swift motion, Richard sliced into my leg. The pain was excruciating, and I screamed into the gag, my vision blurring with tears. They worked methodically, each family member taking a turn as they carved pieces from my legs. The room was filled with their murmurs of approval and the sickening sound of flesh being cut. "She tastes even better than I imagined," Richard's uncle said, licking his fingers. Richard's mother smiled. "I knew she would. Such a lovely, plump girl." I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness, the pain and blood loss overwhelming me. As darkness closed in, I heard Richard's voice, filled with pride. "We did well, family. She was perfect." Chapter 6. The Aftermath. When I awoke, the room was empty. I was no longer bound, but the pain in my legs was unbearable. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy and weak. The door opened, and Richard's mother entered, carrying a tray of food. "How are you feeling, dear?" she asked, her tone unnervingly cheerful. I couldn't respond, my throat too dry and raw from screaming. She set the tray down and sat beside me, brushing the hair from my face. "You were wonderful last night. Everyone is so pleased." Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of my situation sank in. They had used me, consumed me, and now they were acting as if nothing had happened. Richard entered the room, a satisfied smile on his face. Morning, beautiful. Ready for another day. I turned my head away, unable to bear the sight of him. Come now, he said, his voice gentle. Don't be like that. We're family now. I closed my eyes, wishing for the nightmare to end, but knowing that I was trapped in their twisted world. Chapter 7: A Twisted Normalcy. Days turned into weeks, and I remained a prisoner in Richard's family home. They treated me with a grotesque form of care, ensuring I was fed and rested while they continued to take pieces of me for their feasts. Each day was a new horror, my body growing weaker as they consumed me bit by bit. One afternoon, Richard's father sat beside me, his expression serious. We've been doing this for generations. It's a family tradition. I stared at him, my heart filled with hatred and despair. He continued, seemingly oblivious to my pain. We've never had someone as perfect as you. You're special. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body was too broken. Richard's mother entered the room, holding a cup of broth. Here, dear, this will make you feel better. I drank the broth, the warm liquid sliding down my throat. It was laced with something that made my head spin, and I soon slipped into a drugged sleep. Chapter 9: The Final Feast. I awoke to the sound of voices. The room was filled with Richard's family, their faces alight with anticipation. They were preparing for what they called the final feast. Richard leaned over me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of love and hunger. It's almost over, my love. You've been perfect. I felt a cold dread settle over me as they lifted me from the bed and carried me to the dining room. The table was set with an array of dishes, and I was placed at the center, surrounded by the family. Richard's father raised a glass. To our guest of honor, who has brought us so much joy. They toasted, their faces radiant with satisfaction. I closed my eyes, unable to bear the sight of their twisted celebration. As the glasses clinked and the family began to eat, I felt a deep, bone-chilling terror. The reality of my situation was inescapable, and the pain was unbearable. They had taken everything from me, and now they were about to finish what they started. Chapter 9: The Revelation. The room was filled with the sound of chewing and the clatter of cutlery against plates. My body was numb from the drugs they had given me, but my mind was painfully alert, forced to witness every horrifying detail. Richard sat beside me, occasionally stroking my hair with a grotesque tenderness. "You've made us so happy," he whispered. "You're truly one of us now." His words made my stomach churn. I couldn't understand how he could be so detached, so twisted in his love for me. This was not love. This was madness. As the meal progressed, I noticed the family exchanging looks and whispers. Richard's uncle leaned over to his wife, a gleeful grin on his face. "Can you believe how lucky we are? She's been the best we've ever had." His wife nodded, her eyes glinting with a mixture of pride and satisfaction. "I know. She was worth the wait." Richard's mother, ever the gracious hostess, turned to me with a smile. "You're a part of our family now, dear. Forever." I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to express my horror, but the drugs kept me immobilized and silent. I was a living corpse, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Chapter 10: The Descent into Madness. The days that followed were a blur of pain and horror. Each day they took more of me, and each day I grew weaker. I was no longer a person. I was a resource, a meal to be consumed piece by piece. Richard continued to show his twisted form of affection, visiting me daily to assure me of his love. "You're doing so well," he would say, his voice filled with pride. I couldn't ask for a better fiancé. The family, too, treated me with a perverse form of care, ensuring I was fed and hydrated enough to survive, but never enough to regain any strength. They wanted me weak, compliant, and ready for the next feast. One evening, Richard's father sat beside me, his expression serious. "We've been doing this for generations," he began. "It's a tradition that binds our family together, and you've been a part of it now." You've made us stronger. His words made my skin crawl. How could they see this as a tradition, something to be proud of? It was monstrous. Chapter 11. The Final Moments. The night of the final feast arrived, and the atmosphere in the house was electric with anticipation. I was too weak to protest as they carried me to the dining room, placing me on the table as the centerpiece of their macabre celebration. The family gathered around, their faces alight with excitement. Richard's father raised his glass once more. To our beloved, who has brought us closer together. They toasted, and I felt a deep sense of despair. This was it. This was how it would end. As they began to carve into me, I felt the pain but was too weak to scream. My vision blurred, and the last thing I saw was Richard's face, filled with a sickening mix of love and satisfaction. Epilogue, the aftermath. Richard's family continued their twisted tradition, celebrating their success and looking forward to the next event. They were proud of what they had done, proud of their strong family bonds. To them, I was not a victim but a participant in their ritual. They spoke of me with reverence, remembering the sacrifice I had made for their family. Richard, too, moved on, finding another fiancée who would unwittingly become the next participant in their horrific tradition. They were happy, content in their twisted reality, and nothing would ever change that. The nightmare continued, hidden away in the quiet countryside, far from prying eyes. The family thrived, bonded by their shared secret and the blood that bound them together. For Richard's family, it was a happily ever after, their dark legacy preserved and cherished. The cycle would continue, and they would always be ready for the next feast. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, please share this podcast with your friends and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to visit my website at www.tonyc.info for more content, updates, and exclusive behind-the-scenes insights. This podcast is mainly supported by listeners like you. If you want to help keep the stories coming, consider supporting me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/JTAC. Even just $1 a month makes a huge difference and helps me continue to create the content you love. Thank you again for listening. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, stay safe and keep exploring the unknown.